that, I want to welcome everybody, wish you well, hope you're hanging in there in these turbulent times and you're staying well and staying healthy. We're very, very fortunate today to have our honored guest, Dr. Eric Eversley, a two-way football athlete, also a track athlete from the 60s for us, a 2005 Hall of Fame member who then followed up his time at UMD with an impressive career in education, has a master's degree from Colorado, a doctorate from Harvard, and really was a leader in education across the country. And so excited to have him with us today to share his insights, his experiences, and his stories. I am very fortunate to call Dr. Eversley a friend, and we are incredibly proud to call him a bulldog. So with that, Dr. Eversley, welcome. Thank you. I know you've just moved. You've had quite a bit going on in your life. You're very kind to share your experiences with us, and I look forward to that today. So just to get started, tell us about getting recruited to play football and to run track for the Bulldogs.
Oh, great. Well, hello, Josh. Hello to everybody who's there. Thanks to the Duluth Coffee Company for sponsoring this series. That's very generous on their part. Well, let's see. I attended high school at Minneapolis Central when there was a Minneapolis Central, which is on the south side of Minneapolis, not very far from the unfortunate incident that occurred in Minneapolis recently. But in any case, at Central High School, which was an urban school, of course, and an integrated school, I worked hard at being a student, and I graduated near the top of my class in the top honors group. And I played football, basketball, and ran track there. Our senior year was really pretty remarkable, I think, in sports in Minneapolis. We won the Minneapolis championship, went undefeated, and I believe we still have the record of having given up only one touchdown in the course of an entire season.
Very good.
There was no state championship in those days, but the Minneapolis champion played the St. Paul champion at the University of Minnesota Stadium in what was called the Twin Cities game. And we won that game, so we were the Twin Cities champion. In basketball, we won District 17, fell one win short of the state tournament, which was only an 18 tournament at that time. And we were the state track champions. So it was quite a remarkable senior year, and that caused us to get quite a bit of attention. And so I was recruited by about 10 or 12 schools, UMD being one. The Twin Cities campus was another, United States Naval Academy, and so on. But I ended up deciding to go to UMD for lots of reasons. One of which was that you could play as a freshman. In those days, freshmen were ineligible from playing varsity sports at D1. And so I figured, well, I could play right away if I go to UMD. So Jim Molosky came down, and he was a very impressive guy, and he had a lot to do with me going there. I didn't know anybody in Duluth. In fact, when I arrived on campus for the opening of practice, he's the only person I knew there. So one of the things that I think was really important for me was that I didn't, even though I was a good student, I had not gotten the kind of counseling advice that would have been helpful to me with regard to college admissions. My mom was a high school graduate. She was from Minneapolis. And so she was a high school graduate, worked for Minneapolis, what was then called Minneapolis Honeywell, as an assembly line worker. So we didn't have, I'm saying all that to say, we didn't have any in my immediate family, any college experience. So when the coaches started to come around, they said, well, have you taken the ACT? Have you taken the SAT? And I'm like, so what's that? So, I'm a senior. You know? So anyway, that was really very helpful because that helped to get me on the track I really should have been on. Being a good student is not enough. It does take some other supports around you. You don't do it all by yourself. You need supports around you to help you get yourself into the right set of experiences so that you can do what you need to do. So anyway, I came to UMD and I ended up not even realizing until I got on campus that I was the only Black football player and only one of maybe a handful, 6, 7, maybe Black students on the campus, which had about 5,000 students at that time. But things started from there, and the athletic experience was part of what made the whole experience, pretty manageable at my end.
So you get to UMD, you're a two-sport athlete, you don't know anyone. Obviously, if you're in our Hall of Fame, you had some athletic success. How did you go from rolling into a new community, a new campus, to having the success that you did competitively?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think my introduction to football at UMD was not an easy one necessarily. I mean, the college level has a level of rigor that that's certainly up 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 steps from what you experience at the high school level. So that was part of it. I think it was just working hard, getting through the challenges early on. I mean, I'd have to admit that I did think about, maybe I could put all my clothes in a trunk and get back to Minneapolis on the train. But I'm glad I really didn't do that. The experiences with the athletes and the athletic department was all very, very positive. I can't say that was true across the city at that time, but
sure.
Certainly there and for the most part on campus, it was an environment where you could get some things done. One of the Hall of Famers, Harry Oden, was still on campus at that time. He graduated a few years before. And so as a Black person on campus, he was really very helpful and supportive. And Jim Molosky was. I mean, you could go to Jim Molosky, despite all the images that people have about Jim Molosky. But he was a guy that would support you. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. Anyway, by the time the first game came around, I'd worked my way up to second team defensive back. And in the first game of the year, the gentleman who had played, who was a starter, missed a tackle. And if you know Jim Molosky, it was like, oh, get out of there. Eversley, get in there. And so I did go in and I intercepted a pass that game. And then I started every game for the next 4 years. I ended up playing largely defense my freshman year, some offense. And then I played both ways and started both ways, ran back, punts and kickoffs and all of that. So it was, so I had a lot of exposure, a lot of opportunities despite the injuries. And the first couple years, I think we had losing seasons. The last 2 years we had winning seasons. We lost only one game my senior year. So that was, it was an interesting journey along the way. and bringing my game up to the level of rigor required at the college level at UMD, adopting a little bit less of a finesse and more of a smash mouth football. Incorporating that into my game was a part of it too. And I studied a lot, not only with the academics, but also on the football side. I mean, I was sure that I was prepared for every game before we ever put a foot on the field. So my Friday evening was taken up with that kind of study. And I had good people around me. I mean, you don't do it yourself as a running back. And, you rely on your colleagues. And I had great people surrounding me, and I hope they felt I was a good person surrounding them, so that we enjoyed success together, because that's what it's all about.
Well, for you to be returning kickoffs and punts and defending receivers and leading the team in rushing, you must have had some wheels. I've spent quite a bit of time with you. You've still got some quick steps. I've seen it live in person. So,
well, I
you
need
mentioned
to talk to my knees at this point.
yeah. Well, it's certainly better to wear out than rust out.
You got that right.
You mentioned Coach Malosky, certainly an iconic figure in our history, in our football history, and we know he embodied toughness. But I think you also hit on something important there, how much he cared about his players, and I think there was certainly a lot of tough love there as well. But you hit on that and his support of you, particularly as at that time the only Black football player on the team. I think that speaks volumes to Coach Mo and who he was as a person and in supporting you. And I've seen it when I think it was probably 2 years ago, you were on campus and you and I spent some time walking around the athletic facility so we could show you some of the updates that have been made and a little different than from when you were competing. I think the facilities are a little fancier now, but to watch some of our guys of color see you and I think just to spend a couple minutes with you, you inspire them and they're proud of you and how you came before them and the success that you've had. So thanks for being a role model for those guys. And I know it probably doesn't necessarily be front of mind when you're meeting them and when you're talking to them, but I personally see the impact that you've had on them. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, well,
anything else on Coach Mo? Every time I'm with somebody who played for Coach Mo, they tend to have a pretty good tidbit for me.
Well, he was, we all know about the sort of intensity that he brought to things on the field, and some of the comments that he made to players and so on are sort of classic. But, there are a couple things that I hope don't get lost in the whole process. One is he was very much into education. He was very much into his athletes graduating. And I don't know where the academic success, that whole philosophy came from that we enjoy right now at UMD. But certainly it has some roots back there somewhere with Norm Olson and Lloyd Peterson and others. But there was leadership there so that he would do anything he could do to help you get in a class or deal with a faculty person problem or whatever. And he stood by his people after their 4 years of eligibility were up. And if they still had some time remaining to complete to earn their degrees, then he supported them and found ways for them to finish. And that was not an era where where there was any metric by which a coach was honored for having your athletes graduate. It just wasn't, things just weren't that way. So he was out there really doing something that was important. The other thing I would say is he was very personable and concerned about the other dimensions of you. I mean, I can remember my freshman year, sometime during the fall, I remember he said, you want to go get a haircut? Well, I didn't know where to go get a haircut in Duluth. I didn't have a car or anything. So he took me down. He'd probably be sanctioned by the NCAA for doing that now. But that was important to me. So then I had a connection, and he helped me prior to my freshman year that summer get a job at the Minnesota Highway Department down in Golden Valley. And I had a job at WDSM. And so he had this other side. My mom had some illness, and he'd ask me like every day or every time I saw him, how's your mom doing? I hope she's doing good. I mean, so there was that side of him too. He's a very complex guy, but a very important person in my life.
Sure. Well, that's wonderful to hear, and I appreciate you sharing those stories. I think you hit on something that's certainly near and dear to me, and what I try to do in leading the athletic department with our staff and coaches, and that's the academic excellence piece. It's as you well know, a core part of our mission, one of the 3 C's, and something that we've seen some great success in. But I think, Doc, what you hit on is it's not new. And while we've set records and it's permeated out to every single team, and people will congratulate the department on it. And my first response is that this is a long-standing tradition of Bulldog athletics, and it may not have been in the uniform fashion that we see it now, and it may not have had the metrics, but I think for decades, half century, we've had programs and coaches that were committed to the academic side, and we're not going to be setting the records that we are now. And even in wake of the pandemic, last spring, we had our best single semester GPA of a 3.44 for 400 athletes across 16 teams. And some of our teams had team GPAs in the 3.7s. So super impressive, but I love to hear from our athletes that competed years ago that it happened back then too. And all we've done is kick it up a notch. It's really one of the things that attracted me to a place, because my mom worked at 2 Ivy League schools, and she's not going to let me be part of an institution that's cutting corners on the academic side of things. So it's great to hear that, and I love you sharing those stories. Thanks so much. So you have your success on the football field, running track at UMD. You graduate, and then you go into coaching. So what was that like?
Well, I had the good fortune of going back to start my career in education at Minneapolis Central, from which I graduated. And I taught history and economics there, and started as an assistant football coach, and worked for, on the athletic side, worked under Don Hudson. Is a name that people around Minnesota know or should know. Don was the first Black coach, head coach in football, I believe in any sport, hired in the city of Minneapolis in 1968, and which is a sad commentary in and of itself, but not that he was hired, but that it took so long. So I worked with him and learned a lot from him. He then went on and became the head football coach at McAllister College.
Right.
And at that time, with that hiring, he was the first Black head football coach at the collegiate level in a majority white university. This was about 1975, 76, I think. So sometimes it takes a while for things to come around to where they ought to be. But I had the good experience of working with Don, and he and I were great close friends for many, many years until his passing a few years ago. But yeah, so then at some point, I became head coach at Central High School, and it was very tough. I was gone for a year when I went to the University of Colorado Boulder, as you had indicated in your intro, and got my master's degree in economics and some work in education. But Don Hudson figures into that, and it's one of the things that I think any of us has a chance to do for other people. particularly to keep academics at the forefront. I was very serious about winning and sports and the rigor and the study and the putting in the time and all of that. But he gave me an opportunity to go there. He and I were coaching together. I was the first assistant. I applied for a fellowship program at the University of Colorado. I didn't think I'd get it. I got it. I went to him and I said, I'm really, I have a dilemma here as what to do. And thinking perhaps he'd say, well, can you put it off for a year or whatever? He didn't. He said, you got to go do that. And so I left for a year. And that was important because it said academics is important. That's how you're going to move forward no matter what you decide to do. And we can all do that for each other. So anyway, I had a good chance to work with him. But then later, when I was head coach, I applied for a program at Harvard Graduate School of Education. A fellow by the name of Richard Green, who was the superintendent in Minneapolis, had gone to this program, as had the superintendent, John Davis, actually. And he encouraged me for a couple of years. He kept beating up on me. You got to go do this. You got to go apply for this. So I did. Richard was black. So anyway, I did. And I got in the program. So then I decided I'd go to Harvard. It was a rare opportunity, and there was some fellowship money, thank goodness, that went with that. And so I called the team together, and we were all crying in that room because I'd known these players since they were much younger kids. And then I went off to Harvard. So yeah, but it was a good time in Minneapolis. It's good to go back. It's good to give back. It was good to go to be in my community and make a different kind of contribution.
Sure.
What's important.
Well, and then from there, I mean, that's I think your opportunity to be a student athlete and a coach is probably one of the reasons that we love having you around so much, because you understand intimately on a very special level the pursuit of athletics and the multidisciplinary excellence that we're seeking to achieve, and the pressures on our athletes and how they navigate those pieces. But then tell us about where your career went from there, because frankly, it's very impressive and we're very proud of what you've accomplished.
Oh, well, thanks, Josh. Yeah, and I've had some good opportunities and been able to take advantage of them. I went from after a couple years at Harvard. That program there, the doctoral program, requires 2 years of full-time residence. And so after the 2 years there, I hadn't finished my writing yet, but I took a job with the Cherry Creek School District in suburban Denver, Colorado. It's a predominantly white, quite wealthy suburban district. In fact, I think I was the second Black administrator ever hired there. And so over the course of my 18-year career there, I was a middle school principal and a high school principal and an executive director and interim superintendent for a while. And then I wanted to pursue my own superintendency. And so I ended up relocating to suburban Chicago, where I was superintendent for 6 years at the Proviso Township High School District. And people who know about Proviso East basketball will, or know of basketball period, will recognize the names of Doc Rivers and Michael Finley and Shannon Brown. And those are graduates of that school district that enjoyed distinguished careers and still are, in terms of Doc Rivers, in sport of basketball. So anyway, I was there for 6 years and then moved on to the state of New York, Long Island. And I ran what's called a Board of Cooperative Educational Services We were the largest, worked with 53 school districts on the eastern half of Long Island. And in that job, you provide services, state support and state oversight for the school districts in the area that you service. And you report directly to the Commissioner of Education. So I did that, and then I moved on to a school district in Nassau County, also on Long Island. And I was there until I completed my career. I was there for 8 years, I guess, as the principal in Freeport. So yeah, so I had a chance to do those kinds of things. And along the way, when I was in Cherry Creek, I was invited by the North Central Association of schools and colleges and universities to conduct accreditation evaluations of the Department of Defense dependent schools, a couple schools in Germany. So I spent a month in Germany. The school district very graciously allowed me to go do that. And it was during the academic year. And I joined a colleague from Indiana University, and we evaluated several schools in the Ramstein, Kaiserslautern area. So that was good. That was a good month-long experience. I wasn't excited about doing the report writing afterward, but we certainly got that. We got that done. And so I've had some experiences like that. When I was at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, I was part of a field study team, a small group that worked with one of the professors, Mark Shedd, there, who we went to Wilmington, Delaware, and we did a field study to assess the status of the desegregation efforts that were taking place in the Wilmington, Delaware area. So I've had a chance to do a few of those kinds of things along the way that have sort of enhanced the experience overall. And over the 41 years I was in education, I've worked about half the time in wealthier suburban settings, but I've also worked in very urban settings where the student population was largely students of color. At Proviso, it was 90%. When I was on Long Island and Freeport, 50% of our students were Spanish-speaking or from Spanish-speaking households. So it's been a good career in the sense of experiencing education and seeking to cause some good things to happen in places that are very different and serve very different clientele.
Just a reminder to folks, if you have a question for Dr. Eversley about football or track or anything, feel free to put it in the chat. I think before I ask you some of our fun questions that we ask our student athletes as they exit after a career here, I'd love to just get your take a little bit on a couple of pressing issues. So we've got schools trying to navigate reopening, and I'm not trying to go anywhere near the political space here, but I'm sure there are some weighty challenges, and I'm sure you're watching closely and have some thoughts there. And we're also at hopefully a step forward, frankly, on the equity and social justice and inclusivity side of the world in the wake of George Floyd's murder, and that obviously hit home. We had student athletes who were at those protests, of course, in peaceful fashion. But there's a lot going on in the world right now, and as much as you're comfortable, would love some of your perspective, given your life experiences and some of the unique personal and professional courses that your life has taken relative to these pretty heavy topics.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And thanks for asking about that. I think this is a very difficult time, and the George Floyd incident, the other incidents that have now come to light following that, as well as the pandemic, have brought to light things that were there all the time. Issues that have not been addressed or effectively addressed over a period of time. And people have had a hard time not getting their voices out there, although that's been an issue, but getting sustained attention to really correcting the ills that have been problems in our society for decades. The schools, talking about the schools for a minute, have always been the place where these sort of issues play out. That is to say, because of discrimination in housing, schools become segregated when you're operating on a neighborhood school concept. And it is troubling in this country, not discussed as much as it ought to be. But there was attention certainly toward desegregating schools. Schools have become resegregated. And so if you look at some places around the country, you've got highly segregated settings, and Long Island is one of those places, one of those many places where schools are largely Black or Latino or largely white or largely wealthy. So you've got the racial disparity, you've got the economic, socioeconomic disparity. That's been there all the way along, and it's just now getting some attention. The inequities in schools are enormous. They have been historically, prior to desegregation. I know people have awareness of what the inequities were at that time, but those inequities have continued, and communities that working class communities or with with smaller tax bases have had a difficult time bringing their schools, their equipment, their facilities, materials, access to technology, those things to the students and the families that they serve. And so that's just coming to light. So now when you look at interest in going online and delivering instruction online, those disparities become highly significant. Not every family has access to the internet. Not every family has a computer they can dedicate to instruction. Students have relied on public libraries, but now you can't go to the public library anymore because they're not open or they're not available. So those inequities just continue to play themselves out, and they're even more apparent as time goes on. Certainly the first thing you have to do is, in this pandemic era, is you have to safeguard the students and those adults who work in school settings. That has to be the highest priority. You can't will people back. The public schools don't have the kinds of resources to socially distance everyone. I'm thinking, in fact, this is a time when I'm sure some people would say, boy, I'm glad I'm not a school superintendent or a principal or whatever, but this is a good time to be in those jobs, in those roles, because it requires strong and appropriate and sensitive leadership, good, solid thinking with kids and families first. And you want to take care of your employees along the way, because it's the combination of all of those factors that makes things work. So the current interest in let's just open the schools is irresponsible. I think families are going to make, ultimately they're going to make the decisions. It's not going to be somebody else deciding that schools ought to be open for whatever reasons. Parents are concerned and about their children. Kids and families care about their teachers and the people that are in the schools that are important to them. And that's got to be the first priority. And then we work through how we can bring the instruction online in an equitable fashion so that every student has the opportunity for a quality education. But in some cases, that will cause great strain, economic strain on school districts, where they may need to provide equipment and technology and access to technology to students so that they're able to keep pace. All students are able to keep pace with their peers. It's a difficult, challenging time, but I think we still have to be responsible and stick with the core concept that every child needs an access to a quality education. And we need to make sure that happens even during this difficult time.
I appreciate your thoughts on the focus on the students and the focus on the safety of people. And I think those have been guiding principles, and it's analogous. We're certainly different at the higher education level. And I would anticipate that being part of a large system like the University of Minnesota, the resources, while challenging, certainly like resources are challenging everywhere, in better position than certainly several school districts. And we're figuring ways out to change instruction to protect faculty, and all those things are happening now. And the clock's ticking as we look to mid-August to get back to some in-person instruction. And
Yes.
Excited for that, but certainly challenges that come with it.
Yeah, no, it's we now have the opportunity to give some attention to these issues that have surfaced sort of on a broader platform. I would certainly hope that this opportunity would not be squandered, but it will be difficult. And I think going forward, we're going to be a very different country. And whether that's different for the better or not, or whether or not we're promoting greater equity or not, will depend on how we handle things in this period going forward. I'm optimistic, like a lot of folks, but I'm also not naive. It could go another direction, and certainly at higher ed. And going back to sports for a minute, sports is a great place for things to come together and for people of different colors and persuasions to come together and do something constructive together. And certainly the loss of that, I think, is unfortunate. Loss in, at least hopefully in the short term,
Right.
because we need that as a part of our recovery, I think, as a society.
No, I couldn't agree. In so many ways, sports has been either a distraction or a stress reliever or a unifier, and athletic ability can help people get access to scholarships that they may not otherwise. And here at UMD, our student athletes represent a very large portion of our cultural diversity on campus, and it's important. And we feel we have a role and a duty, and appreciate what you did as an early pioneer, frankly, of diversity in our athletic department. And it's good to see where we're at, knowing that there's plenty of work ahead of us. I appreciate your thoughts and guidance.
Thanks for sharing that, Josh. And yeah, there is more work to do at UMD, and it's it's keeping the maintaining an environment on campus that's really conducive to supporting diversity. So I mean, part of the challenge is working to become more diverse. And the second is, how do you effectively support, making sure that you effectively support those students and their families once they are on campus.
So a couple of shifting gears a little bit. We do exit interviews. The folks that are with us today that have seen our previous Coffee with the Bulldogs know that we do this, and there's a standard list of questions, and we use those to continuously improve and help our coaches who want to get better every year. But some of them are kind of fun. So I'm going to ask you a couple of those. The first one is best and worst moments as a Bulldog during your career. Can be anything. Competitively, academically, whatever pops into your head, best and worst moments as a Bulldog.
Okay, let me see if I can do a couple. On the athletic side, I'd say our win my senior year in football against South Dakota State. We went to their house, and they had beaten us the year before pretty handily. But we went to their house, and we won 12-7, I think was the score. And, you know, that was a program that was a level above our program. And so that was a big win. There were lots of great plays during that game. I was fortunate to intercept a pass and run it for a touchdown. During that game. And so that was a big win and something I really feel good about. An interesting aside, I'll be quick about this. So I'm running into the end zone, and the end of the field is like open. It's like an open field. And you couldn't see all the lines. And so I'm like, I didn't know when I was getting to the end line. So I ran past the goalpost because I was sure that I was at least going to score.
That's pretty good.
So that was certainly one. I had a chance when I was at UMD to broadcast the sports on Saturday night on WDSM. And that was interesting, an interesting experience. I wasn't swamped with offers from CBS and NBC to continue that career, but it was a good experience, and I'm grateful for the opportunity that Bob Junker and Molosky, whoever had something to do with that. I remember I lived at Torrance Hall when I was at UMD. And I was a counselor at Torrance Hall and senior resident at Torrance Hall, actually, as well. And I remember walking across what we used to call the tundra, which was the area from the corner of Woodland and College, I don't remember the name of the streets, all the way to the campus. And in the winter, that was unbelievably bad. And when you had early morning classes, the shuttle bus didn't run that early. And so you had no choice but to walk across that very inhospitable terrain.
The wind whips right through that space. There's more buildings now, but the wind still gets going right through there.
Yep, absolutely. After our final game, my senior year, we'd beaten Superior State pretty handily. And we were celebrating in the locker room, and some of the guys grabbed me and they threw me in the pool. Well, the thing there's nothing remarkable about that except I don't know how to swim. And so they knew that. So the other guys were diving in to make sure that I didn't drown. That was pretty significant.
That's pretty good. They had your back.
Well, they had my back. I had their back. Yeah. And the first injury I had, serious injury when I was a freshman, I had a hyperextended elbow. And I went to the hospital along with Herb Lewis, who'd gotten injured. Herb Lewis, who many know. And we went to the hospital, and so they came out and they said, well, I got good news for one and not so good news for the other. And I was the good news, even though I missed 2 games and was in a lot of pain. But Herb had broken his ankle or broken his leg,
Ooh.
so his was unfortunate. But I remember the two of us sitting there hearing this good news, bad news thing, which not so good. The last thing I'll say is I got involved in other things when I was on campus. I was part of a group called Panel of Americans, students of different identities. And we went to some of the communities surrounding Duluth and just sat with people and talked about our experiences and so on and so forth. And that was pretty good. And somehow I got involved with the prom. I don't know how this happened. But so I was the music chairperson for the prom in '68. And I had the three venues that I had to secure music for. And so I was able to get hold of some of the folks I knew in Minneapolis, a group called Dave Brady and the Stars. And they came up to Duluth, and they had a car problem on the way, and I'm sweating bullets, thinking, oh my God, they're not going to show up. They were the main ballroom performance. And but they got there, and so that was good. That was a good time, bringing a little R&B to the UND campus. It was great.
That's good stuff. How about, I got a question from the chat here. Any memories from your time with the track program? Obviously our men's and women's track programs have done very well. Our women's program is doing exceptionally well. But any memories from your time on the track and being a two-sport athlete?
Yeah, it was, I ran track only my freshman year. And part of that was the circumstance. I always liked track, but we had spring football.
Right.
And I was primarily a football athlete. So after practice, football practice during the spring, I would then go to the track by myself, and I'd work on starts and technique and my approach for the long jump. I ran 100 and was a long jumper. So it wasn't ideal circumstance, and I really didn't have a good chance, except for the meets pretty much, to work out with the other athletes and do the kinds of things. That's an important part of sports as well. But I had some good success running track. I think we had a good program at that time. Folks worked very, very hard. We didn't have, I'm almost certain we didn't have any meets at home. So we were on the road on the weekends, going to the different venues to compete. But I'm glad I did it. I regret that I wasn't able to continue, but it also gave me more time because I was working hard to be a student and graduated cum laude. So it gave me more time to work on academics and other things.
Being a two-sport athlete is incredibly challenging. I don't think we see as much of it maybe as we did a few decades ago. We have had a good number, mainly women's volleyball, women's basketball, softball. On occasion, we'll have a football or a men's basketball player do some track activities. And I can remember just a couple of years ago, literally watching one of our volleyball, women's basketball student athletes changing shorts in the hallway, going from one practice to the next. Allison Oley, who was was a great Bulldog. So it's a unique commitment and certainly time demanding. But if you're able to pull it off, it's a pretty cool thing. So last question, unless there's something else you'd like to add, I have one last question for you here. What advice would you give yourself, 17 years old, headed up from Minneapolis to Duluth?
Interesting question. I think it's, have confidence in yourself. You're going into a place you don't know. You elected to do it. So, stay committed to the decision you made. Um, and you know, if things get to be intolerable, then you have to make a decision. But the you know, but have confidence in yourself that you can get it done. Again, I didn't have you know, parents that went to college. I was a single parent family actually, but I think that's important. And then don't let the surprises get in the way and get you off track. The surprises being virtually no Black students on campus, which I never would have assumed would have been the case, or other kinds of things that occur. Don't let those things get you off track, and you'll get through the hard times.
Well, that is exceptional advice. I think you hit on a couple of great themes there. While a lot has changed in college sports, you talked earlier about coaches helping in life beyond academics and in classes, actually classes in competition, something that you did when you were coaching that was done for you and your student athlete. I know you've helped a football player or two in your time that's come out of UMD in your career, and that's much appreciated. And that still goes on today. You hit on that the difference between the high school level and the college level is such a big jump, and that is so true today, particularly with our programs competing, whether it's the hockey's at Division I or the high-end Division II programs. Often we have a team made up of men and women who were the best on their high school team, and now they are on a team that is full of everyone who is the best on their respective high school team. Right. And that's a big jump. That's a big jump. And to see that those themes have held through time is important, because it reinforces what sports is all about, and that's learning how to deal with adversity and leadership development and skill development, all those things that make us better people and strengthen our character. So what a journey you've had. We're so glad that you're a Bulldog. I hope we can connect again soon. I always enjoyed when we'd see you, whether it was you're coming to Kansas to support the football team in the playoffs, or St. Paul to support the hockey team, or the many times we've been able to get together in Denver. And now hopefully we can find a way to have a team in the Pacific Northwest. Congratulations on being able to pull off a move during a pandemic. That is another accomplishment for your resume. And I'll give you the floor one last time if there's anything that you'd like to share with our folks today.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, very much. We're enjoying our time here right now in our new home in central coast of Oregon, and it's very different, in some ways reminiscent of northern Minnesota, but the temperatures are much more moderate of course, throughout the year. Actually, it's Mediterranean climate. Josh, thanks for inviting me to do this. It's really, I appreciate having the opportunity to continue to work with UMD in a couple different capacities, and I appreciate what you've done to bring a level of, I've shared this with you before, but of sophistication, I think, to our program, and on the management side, and it's important. And I'd like to see UMD continue to move forward, continue to bring diversity to the campus, for athletics to play its role, and continue to be the great university that it is. I'm proud to be a Bulldog, and I'd like to go to more NCAA hockey championship games and and see the Bulldogs again. As in football, went to Alabama a couple times for the championship games down there. So hopefully we'll get this problem behind us. We'll get some of the equity and racial things on a better track, and continue to move forward and stay safe. You stay safe.
I appreciate that. Best to Suzanne and the family, and thanks again for your time. Well said. As always, a pleasure to be with you. I look forward to when we can be maybe even 6 feet apart, and at that point talk some more all good things Bulldogs. So Dr. Eversley, thank you very much. Folks that joined us, glad you could be a part of it, and we'll connect soon. As always, go Bulldogs. Take care.